This soldier awaits his imminent demise after striking down countless foes in the New World. But soon, the Church itself will not only spare him from his punishment, but turn him into an untouchable legend. The greatest deception of the Spanish Empire didn't begin on a battlefield in the Americas, but thousands of miles away, within the cold, dark, and damp walls of a convent in San Sebastian. Picture a 15-year-old girl trapped amidst endless prayers, unbreakable stone walls, and an iron-fisted discipline that smothered any spark of rebellion. Her name was Catalina, and she was locked away there when she was barely 4 years old. But not a single drop of religious calling ran through her veins. What flowed through them was pure gunpowder. At 15, the built-up tension exploded in the most violent way possible. After a fierce dispute and a beating from a higher-ranking nun, Catalina made a radical decision that would change the history of an entire continent. She wouldn't wither away for another second within those four walls. That very night, while the whole convent slept in dead silence, she executed a plan that would have been suicide for anyone else. She stole the keys, forced the heavy wooden locks, and slipped out into the pitch-black darkness of the street. She had no money, knew absolutely nothing about the outside world, and most dangerous of all in 17th century Spain, she was a woman. She knew perfectly well that if caught, the punishment would be brutal. So she hid in a nearby forest, took a pair of scissors, and, lock by lock, destroyed her dangerous identity. Her long hair fell to the mud-stained ground. With needle and thread, she tore apart her sacred religious habit and fashioned it into crude men's clothing. When the sun rose the next morning, the devout Catalina de Erauso had ceased to exist forever. In her place walked a solitary young man who went by the name of Francisco de Loyola. But escaping the convent was just the first step in an insane odyssey. For months she roamed across Spain, changing her name, her trade, and her city whenever suspicious glares threatened to uncover her dark secret. She served nobles, worked as a page boy, and learned to toughen her character the hard way.
Sí, soy yo.
She learned to alter the tone of her voice.
Sí, soy yo.
She quickly realized that the world of men didn't forgive the slightest weakness. If she wanted to survive on the streets, she had to be tougher, more insolent, and more reckless than anyone around her. Every false step, every poorly chosen word, could mean the dungeon or something far worse. However, the Iberian Peninsula was getting too small for her. The real stage for someone with no past, nothing to lose, and an endless thirst for adventure lay across the ocean, the mysterious New World. With an almost suicidal audacity, she managed to deceive the port authorities and enlist on an imposing galleon bound for the Americas. The transatlantic journey in those days was no pleasure cruise. It was a veritable floating hell. Disease, devastating storms, rotting food rations, and the constant company of society's worst scum, mercenaries, thieves, and desperate men seeking gold or fleeing the hangman's noose. Cooped up there for months, surrounded by hardened, dangerous men, she had to perfect her act to the absolute limit. She learned to curse, spit, cheat at cards, and above all, wield the steel of her sword. The tempests of the sea forged our protagonist's ultimate armor. When her boots first hit American dirt, the thick, stifling air welcomed her to a lawless land. America was no place for the weak or the hesitant. It was a giant powder keg of ambition, conquest, and death. If she had to toughen up in Spain just to avoid being discovered, here she would have to become an absolute monster to avoid being annihilated. The dirt streets of the colonies were packed with danger at every step, and the only way to earn respect was to prove that your blade was faster and your blood ran much colder than your rivals. Thus, under a new and final identity, the soldier Alonso Diaz Ramirez de Guzman prepared to infiltrate the most powerful and lethal war machine of the time, the Spanish Imperial Army. He wasn't looking for redemption, he was looking for glory, and he was willing to leave an indelible trail of destruction and chaos to achieve it. The New World was no place for sensitive souls. much less the untamed lands of the south. Upon setting foot in the territory we know today as Chile, Alonso Diaz, our fugitive's alter ego, came face to face with one of the most grueling conflicts of the era, the Arauco War. This wasn't a series of isolated skirmishes. It was a lethal trap that mercilessly devoured the Empire's soldiers. The native warriors were formidable, relentless strategists who didn't back down from European gunpowder or steel. To survive in that green hell, Alonso had to snuff out any trace of compassion that might have remained from his time in religious confinement. And boy, did he ever. On the front lines where panic paralyzed the most hardened men, this young soldier displayed a truly unnatural coldness. Not only did he repel enemy assaults, but he also led the most reckless charges, plunging into hostile territory with a fury that terrified both his foes and his own brothers in arms. His skill with the blade allowed him to rise rapidly through the military ranks, earning an unshakable respect built on pure courage. Soon the name Alonso Diaz began to be whispered with reverence across every camp. No one questioned his origins or his mysterious past. His icy demeanor and proven lethality were his only valid credentials. But the conflict wasn't only fought in the vast forests and valleys. When the cannons finally fell silent, the wildest, darkest nature of the colonies abruptly awoke in the taverns. Those grimy, smoke-filled joints were the perfect stage for ego, liquor, and gambling to spark absolute tragedies. Far from seeking rest, Alonso dove into this dangerous underworld with astonishing ease. He became a hardcore gambler who absolutely refused to tolerate any disrespect. If someone questioned his honor at the card table, the immediate response was the metallic flash of his sword. Underground duels in the dead of night became his usual routine. History records that he left a massive and tragic trail of adversaries silenced forever on the cobblestone streets of every city he set foot in. He was a human magnet for trouble, always living on the edge of the abyss and pushing the boundaries of civil authority. His military superiors systematically looked the other way and forgave his severe offenses because, on the battlefield, he was an irreplaceable asset, an unstoppable machine. He had perfected his intricate mask to such a degree that the devout young girl was completely devoured by the ruthless warrior she herself had created. However, as time went on, this frantic spiral of chaos, late-night violence, and impunity couldn't last forever. Playing untouchable comes at a steep price, and fate had an irreversible ambush in store for him. A chance encounter in the dark would trigger a mistake so horribly devastating that it would change absolutely everything. That fateful night, in a dead-end alley, the blade of his sword would claim the life of the only person on the entire continent he truly loved. The point of no return had arrived. Fate has a twisted sense of humor, and the cover of night conceals soul-crushing truths. During a dimly lit street brawl, Alonso drew his steel against an unknown adversary. The clash of swords was brief but lethal. As he brought a torch closer to see the face of his fallen opponent, his entire world collapsed beneath his feet. This was no ordinary ruffian. The man dying on the ground was his own brother, who also served in the colonial army. That tragedy pushed her into a spiral of guilt and self-destruction, fleeing frantically from city to city, leaving behind a trail of conflict and run-ins with the law until she ended up completely cornered in Huamanga. Wounded and facing an inevitable trial that would lead her straight to the gallows, she realized her military facade could no longer save her. This brings us right back to the exact moment where we started. With the end breathing down her neck, she desperately demanded to speak with the local bishop. In a privacy of confession, she revealed the secret that would paralyze the clergy. The most feared warrior in the colonies was actually a woman, and what's more, a former novice who had never broken her vows of purity. Completely stunned, the church authorities sent a group of matrons to verify such a wild story. The verdict was absolute. The savagery of the battlefield hadn't tarnished her virtue. Recognized as an untouchable religious figure, civil jurisdiction immediately lost all power over her. She escaped her fatal destiny in an almost divine manner. Her incredible odyssey made its way back across the ocean, turning her into an absolute celebrity in Europe. She was received with honors by the King of Spain himself, and in an unprecedented historical twist, Pope Urban VIII granted her a unique, official dispensation to wear men's clothing for the rest of her days. The fugitive had triumphed over the empire, the church, and death itself, etching her legend into eternity forever.